those kind remarks. And what I'm going to do in the next 20-25 minutes or so is to take you through some of our impressions and findings and thinking about the way in which JUCo could develop, both as an institution and as an organisation which is able to deliver its strategy. Because as I'll come on to explain in more detail a little later, every organisation needs a strategic intent. It needs to have a sense of where it's going to add value, its mission, its real reason for being. But it also needs the resources and capabilities to be there and integrated and aligned to deliver that. Otherwise, we have a strategic intent without the capability to deliver it. So as you'll see, as I develop my argument, we're looking at intention and capability as twins, as the left and right hand. But just before I get into the detail here, excuse me, just before I get into the detail, let me say something about Sophia and the Generalate in Rome. It so happens that Sophia, which is the part of the Salvatorian order which is dedicated to international aid, it's the Salvatorian organization for providing international aid, has an advisory board. And I happen to be a member of that board, and we meet 2 or 3 times a year, and we have met and every time over the last 4 occasions have stayed several hours discussing JUCo and how JUCo can be helped to move forward. And we are aware of the difficulties that you've gone through, and we will be aware when I go back to the advisory board in a month or so as to what you have achieved and how you are working through that. And I'm going to tell the advisory board that in my opinion, JUCo is stronger now than it was because it's identified and overcome really significant problems, or it's gone a long way to overcoming them. And this capacity in organizational science, we're calling it resilience, the capacity to overcome problems, to learn from them, and to move on and be stronger, is an asset for you. So our general finding, meeting people this week, is that fundamentally JUCo is at a tipping point where it can move on from the difficulties of the past to a future which will help you to discharge a mission more faithfully and fully than before. So this is the position that we find JUCo in, and it's a position of hope. It's a position that we believe is like fruit on a tree ready to be taken. But we also believe that you as an organization will need to go through a process of developing your capabilities so you're ready to pick that fruit. And I'll describe a little bit more about this in the next few minutes. So, as we heard from Professor Mukunda earlier, in essence, when we came 2 years ago, we weren't asked to find problems within JUCo. We were asked what would be necessary to move from being a university college to being a standalone university. What additional capabilities would you need to achieve that? And this was the mission that we had. Now, come back 2 years later, and we are looking at JUCo, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we find that there's a readiness to move on. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to imagine that it is 2021, the same date, and we're sitting in this room now, and we're considering what has been achieved between 2021 and 2018. And what I'm going to do now is to list our view of some of the things which could be achieved. And this is just our view as a contribution to discussion. So, on the first, it's the first day of a new era, and we have not Jordan College, but Jordan University. In our opinion, subject to all sorts of external factors, you would be absolutely ready to take this job within that time frame. So what sorts of things are happening? Well, teaching excellence has moved from being good to great. As I'm sure many of you know, there is a lot of interest in that teaching excellence framework at the moment, so it becomes more realistic and precise in determining what it consists of. And what I'm imagining here is that you have subjected yourself to world-class standards of teaching excellence, and you have achieved a high, perhaps the highest grade which is possible. So the experience of the students has gone, as I said earlier, from good to great. What else is achieved? The Jordan University has service departments, HR, maintenance, and so on and so forth. These have gone through a process of learning what it is to be a service department that is efficient and effective according to international standards. The standards that I feel should be aimed at in the long term are called total quality management. So it's not just the teaching and the academic resources which have been upgraded, it's every component within JUCo itself. So the support services here have got the International Standards Organization certification. They passed the test of being of international standards of quality. And this means you can rely on them. This means that they're managed well, that they're lean, that they're efficient, and that errors are reduced to an absolute minimum, that cycle times of getting things done are as fast as practicable, and the whole thing works as a well-oiled machine. You've also been asked to be a keynote speaker in an imaginary conference. We call it the 21st Century Conference on Catholic Universities. Why is this important? Well, going back to the advisory board that I told you about a few minutes ago, one of the other members of that advisory board is also an advisor to a big Jesuit university in the United States. And what he tells us is very interesting, and that is there's been a lot of work done on what it means to be an effective Catholic university. How do you blend the religious devotion and the principles with the need to be an objective and intensively, in a way, scientific university? And we feel that for an organization like yours to actually have gone through that process of values clarification and learning, and being confident that you are a great example of a Catholic university, would be extremely important. And this is a way of saying that that's a stream of work which needs to be undertaken, in our opinion, over the next few years. Then there's this question of recognition. It's very important to look at not just the students acquiring knowledge, but the students having a student journey that contributes very positively to their lives. So therefore, having the opportunity to actually be in a successful university, not just, as I said, from the academic point of view, but from the point of view of it being a wonderful life experience, is extremely important. There is an audit report which praises JUCo for the efficiency and effectiveness of the way that it handles funds, but also praises JUCo for diversifying sources of income. It is our opinion that JUCo is excessively dependent on student fees, and this is a vulnerability. Many universities around the world have faced the same problem, and there are all sorts of options for expanding not just your impact, but expanding the revenues that you receive. And this is something that is taken seriously, and JUCo has succeeded in moving forward with that. It's our view that a research centre of international standard would be an enormous asset, not just to JUCo, also to the Salvatorians, and also to the world. And what we're imagining here is that you have done some deal with the Gates Foundation, and you've formed a specialised research group which has international ambition. And the area which I believe is worth considering is something which we call faith-based community development. Now, what that can do is it can provide you with a window on the international academic world. It can open the doors to all sorts of people coming in to work with you and join with you. It will link you to intellectual development and practitioner development on a bigger scale. You can have these ambitions. We also believe that you need to have more interaction with the wider world, and we're proposing that there is a new block which distinguished professors and visitors and so on would like to come and spend time here, and you engage many Roman Catholic professors and so on in helping you to develop. In other words, you don't just use your own resources and capabilities to take JUCo forward. You are, if you like, the hub of activities which are concerned with taking forward the areas that you're involved in. So, that's just a sketch of how it could be. And I'm going to continue with this imaginary journey and talk about how was it achieved. So, this year, the JUCo top management team undertook work to understand what would need to be done to move towards the goals which I just outlined. And the force field method is a method that we use to actually understand all of the factors which relate to how to move forward. And I'm just going to explain it now and then come back and tell you more of the story. So let's imagine that this vertical line represents where we are now. We have clarity about our future intent. And that's one of the areas which we depend upon the top management team in consultation, wide consultation with people across JUCo, to develop so that we have a focus which is achievable, desirable, affordable, and is a good strategy. Now, there are certain forces already in the organisation which are helping us to move towards that strategic intent. And you notice here, I've just shown some by way of illustration. Some of the arrows are thicker than others, which means that they're stronger forces. Some of them are longer, which means that they cover more areas of the organisation. But also, there are factors which are getting in the way, which are hindering or preventing or reducing the chances of moving towards that goal. And the current situation is a balance between the forces which are driving us towards the direction that we want to go and the forces that are preventing us. So when we identify what these forces are and how strong they are, then we can do three things. We can add new driving forces, we can strengthen those that are already there, and or we can weaken the forces that are against us, maybe even removing them altogether. Now, there is no single force which is going to get us to where we want to go. It's looking at the system as a whole and identifying, as I said, what new additional driving or helping forces do we need, how can we strengthen the ones that we've got, and how can we weaken or eliminate the hindering forces. And this is the task for the top management team, as I said, in consultation with many of you, perhaps setting up a dedicated group to coordinate these activities, because they all link together, which will help JUCo to overcome any difficulties it's got, build on its strengths, and move further forward. And what that does is that enables you to get closer to your future intent, your strategic intent. And in essence, what we have done this week is to understand the strengths that need to be built upon, some of the areas of capability which you could say are hindering forces where they're not strong enough, and we're trying to provide to JUCo a comprehensive picture, and it will be shown in this way, of where we are now. So, what will happen? Well, change programs like this cannot all be done at once. They need to be scheduled, we need to take steps. So, with the imaginary story, what happened in 2018? Well, the work was done to clarify the strategic intent. You know, where do we want to go? Where don't we want to go? Why? How can we add value? What are the challenges? What capabilities will we need? Will this really differentiate us? Does it make sense from every point of view, including financial? The force field analysis, that diagram which I showed you schematically, if you imagine it actually populated with real helping forces and hindering forces, that provides like an oval template of all the different activities that need to be undertaken. With big changes, they can't normally be undertaken within the hierarchy of the organisation. You know, because each manager, each supervisor, each leader has their own group, and they're quite rightly dedicated to what that group needs in order to do a good job. And a lot of these forces cross different groups. So we set up a temporary organisation called a change team to address specific issues. And you will need change teams in order to explore issues, working with the top team to really take the thinking further forward. And you need some organisation to the change programme, because looking back at that force field analysis diagram, as I said before, all of those forces are affecting the situation, so all of them need to be worked on. Just working on one or two at random, as it were, will not deliver the intensity that you need. So, by 2019, we're imagining that there's been a major improvement in the academic professional dimension of JUCo, perhaps using this teaching excellence framework I spoke of, but also the total quality management, TQM. This actually will help each and every one of the service departments, because it's designed to do just that. And around the world, tens of thousands, perhaps millions of organizations have benefited from learning these disciplines, from discovering what it takes to be efficient and effective, and comparing themselves with exemplars of a good time. What I'm wanting to see is facilities being upgraded. There are various facilities in JUCo, particularly, for example, the internet services and so on, which are holding their restraining forces. They're preventing or reducing possibility of scholarship and efficiency in studying and in doing research. 2020, working on taking research forward in a way that makes sense to people here, not trying to be like Harvard or something like that, but helping researchers to develop their capabilities to fulfill their career ambitions to a greater extent, and to contribute to teaching, and in areas where they can really make a difference. Connecting more to the Roman Catholic Church, especially its educational provision, African and the wider higher education sector. But also, by 2020, I would like to see experiments in areas such as the effects of digital technology on learning and teaching, on the activities of universities. You're moving from kind of building basic capability to get things done efficiently and effectively into being an innovation-orientated university college. And by 2021, I would like to see all departments actually exposing themselves to international standards, because this is something that moves you onwards and upwards. It is an ambition to, if you're, for example, running the maintenance of buildings, to actually be examined as an estate director. And maybe at that point, JUCo becomes the Jordan University. So this is, as I said, a scenario. There may well be different goals, and there may well be a variation in priorities and so on. But something like this will need to be developed and communicated so that all of us can be part of making it happen. There's a saying which it sounds a little bit simplistic, but there's a lot of truth in it. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And a change of this type, an organisation and strategic development program of this type, requires a high degree, not just of involvement, but of active participation. So it's not not just Professor Mukunda and his team who are going to determine this. It needs to emerge collectively from a process involving many, hopefully all of the people in JUCo, including the other stakeholders, especially, of course, students, also perhaps parents, perhaps related to the government, certainly related to the Salvatorians, and to other people who are influential. So it's a process by which you move from having a plan laid down by the top, this is what we're going to do year by year, and all that kind of thing, into an organic, emerging, dynamic, alive process of becoming. And in fact, the latest thinking about organizational strategy is you never actually have one. You're always developing and emerging your strategy. So, what are critical success factors? Firstly, that the strengths, the helping forces that are already here or you capture are valued, and we use the term amplify, which means you make the most of them. You build on your strengths, you celebrate them, you inquire into why these strengths are strengths. You look to apply these strengths in other areas, to broadcast them not just in one local area, but across the whole organization. So building on strengths is critical. We often spend too much time looking at things we need to fix. This approach is called in organized development language appreciative inquiry. We inquire into and we appreciate the things that work well, helps us to discover the magic, the strange mixture of components which interact together to give us success. We need to face blockages honestly, assertively, and we cannot live. In other words, if there are areas of weakness or problems or it's not working or so on, we can't just kind of, oh, this is the way it is. Successful change efforts require commitment to reducing or eliminating the hindering forces. And energy needs to go into that. It may be uncomfortable, but it needs to be done. Everyone in JUCo will need to devote some time to this. It will vary according to the roles, of course. But this is a program in which everybody will be an active participant. But it's a learning opportunity. You will be part of helping an organization to move into another level of accomplishment. And watching that, being part of it, learning from it, is a great learning opportunity for all of us. And it's also important that people interact together. By that I mean they proactively go out of their way to help each other. If you know something or have some information or provide some advice or something like this to another person, actually share it. Because a community feel, Professor Mukunda referred to it as the JUCo family. A community feel, a family feel, actually will bond you and give you the strength to go through this process. And that concludes the presentation.